Before I begin, we have a hadith that tells us that one who recites or one who puts together one line of poetry in honor of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He grants them a home in paradise. And in order to be amongst those who recite poetry in honor of Ahlul Bayt, I wrote a few lines. I tossed and I turned, and I anticipated your day. From the day of my birth, this creation came to be. What is time? Where is time? Everything was with the divine. Not a second, not a clock, not an hour, nothing was mine. But from the moment I was alive, I wept using the skies. From the moment I was alive, I ordered the raindrops to fly. Yes, I am time, and I apologize it had to come. I had no choice but to follow the instructions of He who is one. By the time my Creator states, man is in despair, but the only one losing is time itself, for it is void of its air. The king which lay lonely, the king which lay thirsty, the king which was alone, as time did not stop, I apologize. I had no choice. Verily, I am the only one in despair. From the very first day, the seasons changed and the weather altered, and I dreaded the moment when the head would be raised. I tried to stop myself, but the command came to be. I woke up that morning and I told myself I was Husseini. But I sat there confused as the day took its course. How could it be my master was below the hooves of a horse? The morning set in and I commanded the sun to return. But Qasim smiled and said, sweeter than honey in the way of my am. So I looked for the moon and I said, return back to the night. But Abbas stood firm and said, we will defend Hussein in his plight. The second and the minutes I wondered who I was, what is time, where is time, everything was with the divine. I have lost all control, it's as if I'm in a maze. I rewind a few years and Ali has his hand raised. I fast forward to this moment when I had nothing to offer. What is time, where is time, everything was with the divine, not a second, not a clock, not an hour. Nothing was mine. So I apologize, my friends, for I have little to offer, except I control the winds and the air and these raindrops to prosper. For a tear in your seeking allows to manifest the light of the beacon. So let me whisper something to all of creation. I love you, Hussein, and I'm sorry I'm time, but I've submitted to the divine. Before I existed, He's the reason I am. For Hussein I am being, and to him I have failed. The clench of the moment and the second was mine, but today I submit to the command of the divine. Karbala was so far on the very first day, when I rejoiced with the angels, our leader showed me my way. His light was manifest before us, and I saw myself turn. Second by second, that clock began to burn. So here we are. On the night like none other, I heard fables and tales from the angels, I swear. They told me to be careful, be as vigilant as ever. You control the date. But today, I responded, I had to submit to fate. So I ask you today to forgive me, O Shia. I left your master alone on the plains of the desert. His body was battered and bruised, as Zainab was witness. What do I say to his daughter so dear? So I apologize, O Zainab, for the blood and the cries and the body so raw. But I know your words, for only beauty you saw. I have nothing to offer but a few couplets in love. For Hussein is my master and I am the dove. So let these lines of poetry be a witness that I'm sorry, my love, but I was suffocated. So I wash the sins of time with these few words, and let it be known to all of the worlds. I love you, Hussein, and you are my king. I love Hussein, and he is my eye. I love Hussein, and he is my light. I love Hussein, and he is my heart. But I failed you, Hussein, in all of my might, for I simply am just time, a creation from your light. So I will lament until the last day, when the trumpet is blown and all creation seeks your way. And this rain will pour down and the seasons will alter. My thunder will crack as a reminder that there's no day like your day, O my master Hussein. That there's no day like your day, O my master Hussein. What is time? Where is time? Everything was with the divine. Not a second, not a clock, not an hour. Nothing was mine. There is no day like your day, O my master Hussein. There is no day like your day, O my master Hussein. If I could ask you all to please recite one Surah Al-Fatiha for the marhumeen of tonight's sponsors, Muhammad Jahangir Haidari, Kulsum Sarfraz Haidari, Marhuma Gulshan bint Hussein, Marhum Ja'far Ali Hussein, Abdul Karim Naji ibn Zahiha, Fatima bint Qasim, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and all of our marhumeen. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المذلومين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب يا مذلوم يا أتشان كربلاء. ما خاب من تمسك بكم والأمن من لجأ إليكم سادتي. يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين بن علي وأولاده وأصحابه عليهم السلام. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق والأصدق القائلين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل السافلين. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Last night we began to reflect on these ayat of the Holy Quran, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the human being that we have undoubtedly the potential and the capacity toward reaching incredible heights. And the idea beyond every single one of our efforts is to be as diligent and as focused as possible, such that we are able to reach the height of perfection in anything and in everything that we do. Whether you cook food, or you play a sport, or you are in any profession, every individual has a strong desire at one time or another to perfect their craft, such that, again, they are able to be the best that they have the potential and capacity to be. And we know sometimes that there are reasons why we are unable to reach that capacity. We're unable to reach that summit. We're unable to reach that potential. Similarly, when it comes to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we are seeking toward doing is becoming the best of God's servants. In Dua Kumail, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he states, Allahumma ja'alni min ahsani abidika nasiban indak wa aqrabihim manzilatan mink. He says, Oh Allah, allow for me to be the best of those in servitude to you and the closest to you in your ranks. At the end of the day, that's exactly what we're seeking. And that's exactly what the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam reaches. When we state, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, we bear witness and we testify that before anything else, that the Messenger of God was the best of his servants, subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Allah subhanahu And God commands us to this within the Holy Quran. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That I did not create man nor jinn except that we enter into a state of worship and of obedience and servitude to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for today's discussion, insha'Allah ta'ala, I want to reflect upon this idea or this concept of seeking perfection in three different dimensions. The first dimension is in terms of reminding ourselves of the biggest obstacle in our effort toward attaining perfection, which is attachment and love of this world. Secondly, to run through these characteristics that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib mentions in saying 289 of Nahj al-Balagha that we began touching on last night. And thirdly, where we see the manifestation of perfection on the day of Ashura. So let's jump right into dimension number one of the discussion. Last night we talked about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us and our minds and our hearts and our souls to be molded through a wide variety of different experiences during the course of our lives. And the hope is such that we are able to push forth against all of those obstacles and against all of those hurdles. My friends, I love you guys so much, but when you guys are all playing the same game with each other right in front of me, if you guys sit in the back, I won't say anything. Hide in that room, no worries. But you do it right in front of me, it's a bit distracting, if you don't mind. Yeah? Please forgive me. Please forgive me. I still love you, don't worry about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that we have to push through these hurdles during the course of our life. And we go through these attachments toward milk and toward property and toward toys at a very young age. And then we begin to attach ourselves to people and networking in our language as we get older. But the idea is to go beyond things and to go beyond people and get to the essence, which is virtue, which is good deeds, which is morality, which is ethics, and so on and so forth. But it's really hard to do that when we are shackled consistently by the desires of this dunya. And which is why we see so much an abundance of ayat of the Holy Quran and ahadith of the Prophet and his family, which tell us to beware of the attachments of this dunya. In a hadith from Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he states, رَأْسُ كُلُّ خَطِيئَ حُبِّ الدُّنْيَا. The reason why, the primary reason why anyone falls into sin or into vice or into an act of transgression is because of their love of this world. Loving this world doesn't mean that we don't have anything. Doesn't mean that we don't work hard. Doesn't mean that we don't make money. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us within the Holy Quran, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ, that God has fashioned the human being with the love of desire. Desire for the opposite gender. Desire for really fast horses. Desire for, mountains of gold and silver. In our language, we can translate that into contemporary things, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the idea is to not be attached to it, but get beyond all of these hurdles and obstacles such that we're able to see the big picture. But someone says, then why is it in front of me in the first place? Again, that's part of the trial. That's part of the test. And when you get through something difficult, you build some grit within you, you feel so much more accomplished at the end of the journey, no? I don't know about you guys. I love sugar. If someone puts a donut in front of me and a pecan pie and a cup of coffee, it's going down in a minute, okay? Because it's really hard for me to control myself. But the minute that all of those physical pleasures and desires are in front of me, and I hold back and I say, you know what? I'm not going to eat any of this, but instead I'm going to go and exercise. Instead I'm going to work out and not eat this. And instead of eating that sweets, I'm going to go eat an apple. I'm going to go eat a banana. How much better do you feel about your decision? We experience this all the time. When you get through that moment where the desire manifests itself in front of you and you're able to push back against it, how great do you feel? You feel like you accomplished something big. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, this world, you have been created for it. And you have to live within it. You have to provide for yourself and for your family and do the best that you can, and there's no doubt about it. But how attached are you going to be to this dunya? In those famous lines of Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli. He states, لَيْسَ الزُّهْدُ أَنْ لَا تَمْلِكُكَ شَيْئًا وَلَكِنْ الزُّهْدُ أَنْ لَا يَمْلِكُكَ شَيْءٍ. He states that abstinence from this world is not such that you don't own anything in this dunya. It's okay to own property. It's okay to drive a car. It's okay to have a nice home. But abstinence from this world is such that nothing owns you, that we are free from the shackles of this world. That when the opportunity comes to give that, you're ready to give. When the opportunity comes asking you to give out of your wealth, to give out of your time, to give out of your energy, to give out of your space, that's the moment where we have to reign victorious. And today, for many of us living in this privileged world that we live in, part of the world, it's not difficult for us to give out of our wealth. All we do is pop out our phones and we make an Apple Pay transaction and we gave and it gets deducted from the bank account. All we see is a bunch of numbers going up and down on our apps. It's not a big deal. What's harder sometimes is that which is seemingly a lot more valuable than our wealth. Who wants to give our time? Time is money. Today, that's the most important currency that we have. But we got a lot of stuff going on. So why would I go out of my time, give out of my time, and come early to the mosque and set this up? Or stay later and clean up? That's true courage. Or let me give out of my own energy. Some people, I don't like to talk to people. Okay? A lot of people don't like to talk to people. But guess what? Talking to people sometimes is giving out of yourself. Because through your words and through your validation and through your listening, you have the opportunity to help and support somebody. My friends, this dunya deceives every single one of us in a different way. But the hope and the aspiration is that we don't become consumed with it and so attached to it that we're unable to see the benefits of the delayed gratification, as we talked about last night. I'll give you a nice line from Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. He states, أُحِبْ مِن دُنْيَاءِ ثَلَاثَةً. He states that from this world, I love three things. أُحِبْ مِن دُنْيَا ثَلَاثًا. الصوم في السيف والضرب بالسيف وإكرام الضيف. The words of Ali, they're always rhyming. He states, I love from this world three things. I love fasting in the summer, and I love striking with the sword, and I love honoring guests. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam sees all of these three things that are seemingly burdensome as beautiful. He sees them as manifestations of his contentment and pleasure with the Lord of the worlds. Nobody wants to fight. In battle, it was hard back in the day. And if the opportunity came today, well, I don't know how we would do, but I know how I would do. I'd be like, no, I'm good, right? I can serve water, I can maybe make some tea, right? But getting on the front lines, I'm good. And fasting during the summer, we always complain, do we really have to fast this many hours? Did people in Mecca and Medina really fast 18, 19 hours and 95 degrees with 98% humidity like we fast today? Well, yeah, people did fast that long, a really long time ago. And Ali ibn Abi Talib said he would look for the moment when he could fast in the heat of the summer. Back in that day, no air condition, no electricity. Can you imagine what life was like? وَإِكْرَامُ الضَّيْفِ, and to honor the guest, to take care of people, to serve the most vulnerable. The idea is to get beyond this massive obstacle and hurdle, which is attachment to this world. Not such that we don't live in it, not such that we abandon it, such that we live in it, but remind ourselves consistently that this world is transient. And through these important qualities and characteristics that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib mentions within Nahj al-Balagha, as we started talking about last night, he gives us the roadmap in terms of how we break the shackles of this world and attain that perfection that we were created for. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We have created you in the most beautiful and the most perfect of forms. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Then we lowered you and placed you in this dunya. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَأَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Except for those who believe and for those who do good deeds. What good deeds are they, O Amir al-Mu'mineen? He states these characteristics about how we, again, can attain the state of perfection. Let's run through them. But before that, one salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So in dimension number 2 of the discussion, the Imam alayhi salam, he states, كان لي فيما مضى أخ في الله وكان يعظمه في عيني صغر الدنيا في عينه. He said, in the past, I had a brother in faith. I had a close confidant who I loved for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was beloved to me. He was massive in my eyes, glorious in my eyes, because he saw this world as insignificant in his eyes. Dunya is not a matter of attraction for him. He always consistently is reminding himself that there's something far greater beyond this world. We talked about that last night. وَكَانَ خَارِجًا مِنْ سُلْطَانِ بَطْنِهِ. And the needs of his stomach, the desires of his stomach, or the desires of his bodily self, was consistently not at the forefront of his mind consistently. You know, one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, as we have within numerous ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a lengthy Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. In a lengthy tradition from the Messenger of God, he talks about, the people at the end of time. And he will say, for instance, the people at the end of time, they're going to build really lavish mosques, but no one will pray in them. The Quran will be on bookshelves, but no one will read them. And amongst the things, as he's speaking about all of these characteristics of the people at the end of times, one of the companions, he stands up and he states, O Messenger of God, these people that you speak about, are they going to be worshiping God, or are they going to be worshiping idols? To which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says this famous line in response. He says that every single dirham and dinar, meaning every single form of monetary currency, is an idol for them. Meaning that this attachment toward wealth, attachment toward property, attachment to this dunya is dangerous. So the Imam alayhi salam, he states, وَكَانَ خَارِجًا مِنْ سُلْطَانِ بَطْنٍ. That friend of mine, he was never controlled by the desires of his stomach. He was never controlled by the desires of his body. His mind was always fixated on something more important and far bigger. فَلَا يَشْتَهِي مَا لَا يَجِدْ وَلَا يَكْثِرُ إِذَا وَجَدْ. Someone last night after the majlis, they said, how do I know if I'm committed to this dunya? How do I know if I'm attached to this dunya? I told him that the lines of Ali ibn Abi Talib, they define it in this statement. The Imam alayhi salam, he states that when they don't get something, they don't dwell on it. And when they get something, they're content with it. They don't want more. It's really hard. And again, I'm not saying, and I'm not pretending to be someone who has reached a state of perfection. But collectively, we self-reflect that when we don't get something, we make dua, oh Allah, give me this. You invest money into this particular thing, and it doesn't necessarily bank out the way that you were hoping for. It hurts, right? It hurts, it's hard. This dunya comes with its own unique obstacles and challenges. Someone desires to marry this person. They want to have a child. It doesn't happen. Some things, they don't manifest the way that we want it to. But the sign of those who are perfect, who have reached that state of kamal, that individual who is close in rank toward Ali ibn Abi Talib, who he says, this man was my brother, is because whenever he didn't get what he had hoped for, he didn't worry. And when he got, sometimes we always think, I wish I could have gotten a little bit more. Always. Again, we're a human being who is never content, or it's so difficult to make us happy. All the time, right? Again, the only thing that changes is what it is that we want. But from a very young age, you give a child a scoop of ice cream. All I want is one scoop of ice cream, Mama, and then I won't ask you for any more. You give them one ice cream, what happens? Just one more, please. It's okay, just one more. One more. You give them one more, this is really good, just one more. Okay, it sounds silly, right? Why did the kid just be happy with the one scoop or the two scoops? Why does it keep on asking for more? You translate that. Fast forward our own lives 20 years from that day when we were kids. What happens? You get something and you want a little bit more. You get this job and you get this salary and you think you're going to be content. And you want a little bit more. And then you want a little bit more. And then you want a little bit more. When does it end? When does it end? The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he states that this characteristic of my brother is such that when they get, they're content. And when they don't get, well, guess what? They're also content. It doesn't faze them. It doesn't bother them. They don't dwell on it. They don't reflect on it and say, if. وَكَانَ, the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam continues. He states, وَكَانَ أَكْثَرُ دَحْرِهِ سَامِتًا فَإِنْ قَالَ بَذَّ الْقَائِلِينَ وَنَقَأَ غَلِيلَ السَّائِلِينَ. That for this friend of mine, most of his life was spent being quiet. Doesn't talk. But when he spoke, everyone listens. And Salamullah alayki ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. The Imam alayhi salatu wassalam, we have this work, Nahj al-Balagha, we're all familiar with it, which compiles these most beautiful and eloquent and charismatic sermons of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And how many times in these last 10, 12 nights have we quoted, Ali said this, and Ali said this, and Ali said this. Ali could have said a lot more, salamullah alayh. He could have said a lot more to those who took away his right. He could have said a lot more in defending the Messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi. People always ask, there's that wisdom behind why Ali is Ali, salamullah alayh. The Imam alayhi salam in this line, he states that this brother of mine was always silent. But when it was time to speak, they speak. They know when is the right time to talk and when is the right time to stay quiet. And when they speak, everyone is silent, knowing who's the authority in the room. Salamullah alayka ya Abul Hasan. When Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam, when he would talk, everyone else would listen. Salamullah alayh. But at the end of the day, it starts with having a sense of presence in the room that is cultivated by the believer, such that they're not talking and telling stories and anecdotes that don't make any sense or always want to take up space. There's always people like that. There's people who always want to take up space, who always have something to say. The greatest quality of the Messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli, was not that he would sit on the minbar and give really, really lengthy and long lectures. In fact, we don't even have most of the sermons uttered by the Prophet of God, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Is that right? Imagine we had every single Jum'ah khutbah that was narrated by the Messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We would have a legacy. Unfortunately, we don't have that today. But what we do know about the Messenger of God is that amongst the best of his qualities was he is someone who would consistently listen. In fact, the people of Mecca, they would be critical of the Messenger of God and they would state, Huwa udhunun. This man is an ear, all he does is listen. How could he be a prophet? A prophet is someone who sits on the podium and lectures people. He rules with an iron fist. Who doesn't love someone who listens today? Active listening is an incredibly important tool that every human being needs to develop at one time or another during the course of their life. When you listen to someone else, how much more do they love you? How much more do they respect you? We all look for a good listener because we always have a lot of stuff to say. This was the Messenger of God, who if he had said something, everyone would have listened. But it was he, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, who was being criticized because he would listen too much. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he states that this brother of mine, he lived the majority of his life in silence. وَكَانَ أَكْثَرَ دَهْرِهِ سَامِتًا فَإِنْ قَالَ بَدَّ الْقَائِلِينَ وَنَقَأَ غَلِيلَ السَّائِلِينَ. But when he spoke, everyone else was silent. And when he spoke and shared wisdom, what he said hit the heart of everyone around him. He continues, Salamullah alayhi. وَكَانَ ضَعِيفًا مُسْتَضْعَفًا. What's the next characteristic? وَكَانَ ضَعِيفًا مُسْتَضْعَفًا فَإِنْ جَاءَ الْجِدُّ فَهُوَ لَيْثٌ غَابٌ وَسِلٌّ وَادٌ. He states that this brother of mine, he was weak and he was feeble. You wouldn't think that this man is so courageous or so brave if you were to look at him from an outer appearance. But when the time came for him to stand up for truth, when the time came for him to speak out, when the time came for him to get out and defend himself, he would resemble a lion in the forest or a snake in the valley. And look at Ali ibn Abi Talib. One day it is said that there was these two young men. They were walking in the streets of Kufa. And as they're walking in the streets of Kufa, one of the elder boys, he tells the younger brother of his perhaps, he says, and this is the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali alayhi salam, who was the victor at Badr and at Uhud and at Khandaq and at Khaybar. And now Ali alayhi salam, he's an elderly man. At that moment it is said that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen was sitting outside of his house. And he was overhearing these two young boys talking about him, salamullah alayhi. And the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam was trying to break a piece of bread. He was trying to break a piece of bread. For those of you who know the seerah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, you know what he would eat. He would eat stale bread that was so stale that he would have to dip it in some water or in yogurt to soften it so he could eat it. So he could teach a lesson to his community in humility. These two young men, they didn't know that that elderly man outside of the house of Ali was Ali, salamullah alayhi. So he was trying to break it on his leg, this stale piece of bread. At that moment, the older brother, perhaps he realized that, wait a minute, that's Ali alayhi salam. So he whispers to the younger brother. He says, Ali alayhi salam at the battle of Khandaq did what he did to Amr bin Abd Wad al-Amri, but now, he's old and he's weak. To which at that moment, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he approached these two young men and he said, my young sons, he said, that Ali ibn Abi Talib who strike Amr bin Abd did it out of the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But me trying to break this piece of stale bread is for my own stomach. That when we do something for Allah Azza wa Jal, we have all of the potential. We have all of the capacity. When we do something for ourselves, sometimes that strength doesn't manifest itself. Someone says, what gives the strength to these ashab of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? My friends, it was their love of Hussein salamullah alayhi.
Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad
وَكَانَ ضَعِيفًا مُسْتَضْعَفًا. On the surface, they are weak and they are feeble. فَإِنْ جَاءَ الْجِدُّ فَهُوَ لَيْثٌ غَابٌ وَسِلٌّ وَادٌ. That seemingly on the surface, they don't have that sense of strength. But when the time comes to do that which is right, to speak the truth, to defend this religion, then you will see them like a lion in the forest or of a snake in the valley. لَا يُدْلِي بِحُجَّةٍ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ قَاضِيَهُ. And they would not put forth an argument. They would not make a claim. They would not state X or Y or Z until they know it with absolute certainty. Meaning what? That the believer, this brother of Ali ibn Abi Talib, why he's so beloved to Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, is because they wouldn't waste time with what it is that they say. Again, these are all things that we're working toward. In a hadith from the Messenger of God, he states, خَيْرُ الْكَلَامِ قِلَّةٌ وَدِلَّةٌ. That the best of speech is short and to the point. You don't waste people's time. You don't go around in circles. We're not supposed to be doing that. That you make a point and you make it clear and you back up what you say with evidences. Again, being so careful. What do we realize? That so much of these characteristics that the Imam alayhi salam is speaking about is not about prayers. He didn't mention prayers one time. He didn't say that this man was so beloved to me because he prayed all night. or because he fasted all day, or because he recited Quran day and night, or because he gave all of his money in charity. So far, 3 out of these 5 or 6 characteristics that we mentioned so far, they have to do with speech. And you'll see it continues. The way that we talk, or how little we talk, or what it is that we're speaking. Again, this tongue is amongst the most dangerous of vessels that the human being has been given. And so many of our ahadith talk about how we need to control our speech. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he continues. He states that this brother of mine would not put forth an argument until and unless it was decided, or unless it was decisive. وَكَانَ لَا يَلُومُ أَحَدًا عَلَى مَا يَجِدُ الْعُذْرَ فِي مِثْلِهِ حَتَّى يَسْمَعَ اعْتِذَارَهُ. He would not reproach anyone. He would not scold anyone. He wouldn't hold anyone accountable until and unless he sat them down and he said, do you have an excuse for what you did? It's so easy for us to jump to conclusions today, right? Someone says, that person said that. We go right to them and say, what's wrong with you? Why did you say this? Why did you say that? Give people the benefit of the doubt. That's so central within our religious tradition. We know that famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he tells us to give the believer, to give the believer 70 excuses. The famous example that we give in Islamic jurisprudence, someone walks into the mosque and they smell like alcohol. Okay, work under the assumption that something dropped on them. Why do you have to assume? Someone walks into the center and they smell like marijuana. Okay. Maybe, for instance, he has a medical condition that requires him to, smoke marijuana once in a while. Bad joke, right? Bad joke. You all get what I'm saying, right? We give people the benefit of the doubt. We give people the benefit of the doubt because that is what the believer does. We work under the assumption that they're always doing the right thing to keep husn al-dhan of others, and the minute that thought enters into our mind, that person X did this or did that, I should look within my own self and say, wait a minute, I'm the one passing judgment. Let me ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness for what I think that someone else might have done. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he states that this brother of mine is someone who before holding anyone to account would sit with them and say, why did you do that? What was your excuse? Give me an excuse so I don't have to hold you to account. Can you imagine? Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayhi, my friends, he is Khalifat al-Muslimin of almost 1/3 of the world as we know it today geographically, in his Khilafah of 4 years and 6 months. Do you know how many times he had to hold people to account? If you actually read, and we don't have a lot of literature with specific details, but some of these letters mentioned in Nahj al-Balagha, they point to this. The Imam alayhi salam would write to his governor and say, I had someone complain to me about you. You need to explain yourself. I'm not going to remove you. First, you explain yourself. If you cannot explain yourself, or if you admit your fault, then I'll hold you to account. But what's your excuse? What's your excuse? So important for us to hold this value of giving others the benefit of the doubt. That's what cultivates and builds community and builds conviction within our hearts as well. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, he continues. And he states, وَكَانَ لَا يَشْكُو وَجَعَ إِلَّا إِنْدَ بُرْعِهِ. He won't complain about his ailment. He won't complain about his difficulty. He would never complain about the hardships that he had gone through until after it was done. People, again, all of us, we do it at some time or another. I'll talk to myself before anyone else. When we're going through hardship, we love to talk about it. This thing happened to me, and I lost my job, I don't have any money, I got sick. And sometimes the smallest thing, right? The smallest thing, to tell a whole entire world, especially in today's culture, right? Because we love, again, for everyone to feel sorry for us. So, I don't know, something happens to us, we get a flat tire, we gotta post it on Instagram, tell the whole world I got a flat tire. So people send us, I'm so sorry, I feel so bad for you, right? The believer is the one who, when something bad happens to them, it's hard for them. They patiently bear it, and then after the fact, they'll tell people, because they're not looking for that sense of sympathy, because they know it's between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that moment. And again, let me just open up one parenthesis, because one time in the past I said this statement, and I didn't clarify. This doesn't mean that if someone is going through hardship or difficulty, that they shouldn't share that with people who can help them and assist them. It doesn't mean that we should hide things from our family members or from people who are intimate with them that way. No. It means that to publicize to anyone and to everyone about the hardships and difficulties that we go through, that's not encouraged within our tradition. There's a balance that needs to be had. The hadith of the Messenger states, Al-mu'min huznun fi qalbih wa bishrun ala wajhih. That the believer is the one who is going through grief in his heart, going through a hard time, but on their face they always see a smile. Meaning that you push through. Yes, internally with you and your family, your close circle, if you need help, you need to go to a doctor, you go to a doctor. You need to go to a therapist, you speak to a therapist. You need to speak to a mentor, you speak to a mentor. When you need assistance, you go and you take the assistance. Nothing wrong with that. But it means to publicly, consistently complain about the difficulties and trials that you're going through, to the extent and the belief that no one can help you other than creation and not the creator, that in itself is dangerous. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam continues, وَكَانَ again, وَكَانَ يَقُولُ مَا يَفْعَلُ وَلَا يَقُولُ مَا لَا يَفْعَلُ. He would say that what he would do, and he would not say that he would do something and then not do it. Again, if someone says, can you do me a favor? If you can do it, you say I can do it. And if you can't do it, be open and honest with people. The quality of this brother of Ali alayhi salam is that whenever he said he would do something, he would never flake, so to say. He would get it done. And when he could not do something, he would say from point number one, from day number one, that there's no way I can do that. Be honest with people. He continues, Salamullah alayhi. Again, speech. He says, وَكَانَ إِذَا غُلِبَ عَلَى الْكَلَامِ لَمْ يُغْلَبْ عَلَى السُّكُوتِ. Very beautiful. He states, if he could not be, even if he could be exceeded in his speech, meaning someone is going to shut him up, so to say, no one could ever defeat him in silence. Meaning what? That sometimes you say something and you realize you're wrong because someone else corrected you. At that moment, no worries. Don't respond. Don't defend yourself when you're wrong. We are in a culture which is always about defending. Don't defend yourself. When you're wrong, you say, I'm sorry, uncle. I'm sorry, auntie. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry, sister. You're right, I'm wrong. Keep quiet. That's it. Admit when you're wrong. As-samtu babun min abwab al-hikmah. In the words of Imam Ali al-Radha, he states that silence is a door from amongst the doors of wisdom. Luqman, he tells his sons, he says that if speech was silver, then silence is gold. Meaning that there's nothing as valuable sometimes than just keeping quiet. Because most problems in this world come from talking too much, from saying things that we obviously should not have said.
If I can have all the brothers just come forward more. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Everyone, please move forward. Please move forward. He continues, Salamullah alayhi. وَكَانَ عَلَى مَا يَسْمَعُ أَحْرَسَ مِنْهُ عَلَىٰ أَن يَتَكَلَّمْ. He states that this brother of mine is more eager to listen than to speak again. He wants to hear everyone else before he says his point. Again, about controlling our speech. وَكَانَ إِذَا بَدَهَهُ أَمْرًا. This is the most important one. وَكَانَ إِذَا بَدَهَهُ أَمْرَانِ يَنْظُرُ أَيَّهُمَا أَقْرَبُ إِلَى الْهَوَى فَيُخَالِفُهُ. He states that if he's confused between two things, should I do this or should I do that? He will see which one of them is closer to his desires and then go against it. So, I have these two options in front of me. I can eat this donut or I can eat this apple. What's closer to my desire? What's closer to a man's desire than a donut? But then I say to myself, wait a minute, my physical body, that's what it wants, so I'm going to go against it. You wake up in the middle of the night and you are having a difficult time sleeping. You tell yourself, either I can push myself and sleep at this moment, or I can get up and make wudu and raise my hands to the Lord of the worlds and say, oh Allah, I love you. And perhaps the reason why you have made me awake at this moment is to supplicate and to seek forgiveness from you, O Lord of the worlds. You push yourself to wake up and raise your hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your desire is to break your fast on a hot summer day when you're fasting a recommended fast. But you tell yourself that, wait a minute, that water that I drink at the end of my fast reminds me of the thirst of Al-Hussein alayhi salam. And that through pushing through this, I will attain that sense of reward that I'm seeking from the Lord of the worlds. Every one of those companions of Al-Hussein alayhi salam could have said, my family is more important to me. My children are more important to me. My wealth, my property, my job, my life is more important to me. But Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, defending him and giving themselves, again, demonstrates their ability to give out and sacrifice anything and everything in the way of the Lord. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam states that when two things confront them, they look at the one which is closer to their desires, and they go against it and they take the other. And then the Imam alayhi salam, he concludes, and he states, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِهَذِهِ الْخَلَائِقِ. He states, and upon you it is incumbent for you to manifest these qualities. فَأَلْزِمُوهَا وَتَنَافَسُوا فِيهَا. So acquire them, meaning be of these people, and make sure that you compete with one another in getting there. It's good to encourage others as well, is what the Imam alayhi salam is saying. If you want to be the brother of Ali, if we want to be the brothers of Ali, the sisters of Ali, then this is what it takes. But someone says, I'm not going to get there. I can't do all of that, it's too hard. The Imam alayhi salatu wasalam also has a message for us. He states, فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِيعُوهَا فَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ أَخْذَ الْقَلِيلِ خَيْرٌ مِنْ تَرْكِ الْكَثِيرِ. He says, don't worry about it. If you are unable to illuminate all of these qualities and characteristics, then do as many as you can, small steps, and build up your capacity to being someone who attains these qualities and these characteristics, because that's what it means to being the Shia of Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Hussein alayhim as-salatu was-salam. And that brings me then to the third dimension of the discussion. And this is with regards to manifestations of perfections as we see on the night and on the day of Ashura. I know that none of you came here this evening to hear me lecture, but you came here to offer your condolences to the Messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi wa ala. So let me tell you, my friends, about these individuals who gave it all for their master Al-Hussein alayhi salam, and teach us and remind us about what perfection means. I'll give you the example of a man by the name of Qais ibn Musahhar. Qais was one of the other messengers that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam sends to Kufa. And he arrives in Kufa, and immediately after he arrives, he realizes that Muslim ibn Aqil has already been captured and that he has been killed. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he imprisons him and he brings him in front of himself. And Ibn Ziyad says, Qais, he says, tell me, what brought you here? He said, Hussein. He said, I am the messenger of Hussein, and my job was to take a look and see what the situation in Kufa was after Muslim ibn Aqil. So he said, I will give you and grant you immunity, meaning that I won't punish you, provided you do one thing. He says, what should I do? He says, I want you to go on the minbar of the Mosque of Kufa, and I want you to tell everyone that you are my supporter, and that everyone should pledge allegiance to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, governor of Kufa, and to pledge allegiance to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. So that all of those Shia, or all of those individuals who are kind of wavering and wondering what to do, they come to our side. Qais, he says, if that's what's going to save my life, I'll do it. So he ascends the pulpit. You know what he says? He gets on top of the pulpit. He begins by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations upon the Prophet of God. And he says, O people, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad has sent me with this task, but I am the servant of Hussein and his father Ali ibn Abi Talib. And may God's everlasting punishment be upon Ibn Ziyad and his master Yazid. And my master is Hussein and his father Ali alayhi salam. That courage, that bravery, they immediately pull him down from the minbar and they kill him in the same way that they kill Muslim ibn Aqil. These companions on this night of Ashura, like we know the Imam alayhi salam, he tells them, he says, oh my companions, inna ashabi, inni la a'lam wa la a'rif ashabi awfa wa khayran min ashabi. He says, surely I have never seen companions as loyal and as beloved as all of you, my companions. And then he says to them, he says that tomorrow is that day of Ashura. And the only thing that that army wants is to spill my blood. So each and every one of you take the hand of your family members and of your tribesmen. Go back to Kufa, go back to Mecca, go back to Medina, go back to Baghdad. At that moment, Habib ibn Madahir, he stands up. Muslim ibn Awsaja stands up. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn stands up. One by one, these companions of Hussein, they stand up and they say, oh Aba Abdullah, as Zuhair ibn al-Qayn eloquently states. He says, oh Aba Abdullah, he says, if I were to go and be killed by this enemy and they were to chop up my body into pieces and burn my body and shatter my ashes on this ground of Karbala, for you 1,000 times, O Hussein. And one by one, they all pledged their loyalty and allegiance to Sayyid al-Shahada. That, my friends, is perfection. That, my friends, is perfection. Like we know, my friends, Al-Hussein alayhi salam, he tells the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad to give him this one last night. And he tells Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas that they should postpone battle until the next morning. لِأَنِّي أُحِبَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَقِرَاءَةِ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. Because I want to spend this night in prayers and in worship and in recitation of the Holy Quran. And that's exactly what they did. The army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, they narrate that when we looked at the tents of Al-Hussein, we heard them buzzing like bees in the dhikr and in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That famous companion Burair, like we know, who had gone through so many difficulties and trials in his life, on that day he was seen smiling and he was seen laughing. They went to him and they said, Burair, we've never seen you in such happiness. We've never seen you in such contentment. He said, why should I not be when tomorrow is the day when I give myself for my beloved, the son of Rasulullah. And while these companions were gathered in their tents, and they were praying, and they were worshipping, and they were conversing with one another in that unique bond of camaraderie, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, for a moment, he exits from the tent. And he's exiting from the tent, and he's picking up some stones and throwing it to the side, when all of a sudden a man by the name of Nafi' ibn Hilal, he comes out from the tents. He's one of the companions of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And the Imam tells him, he says, oh Nafi', he says, what are you doing in here? What are you doing out here? He says, oh Abu Abdullah, what are you doing out here? He said, no, I'm preparing for tomorrow. So the Imam tells him, oh Nafi', he says, you see those two mountains? Why don't you just go in between them and slip back to your home and to your family in Kufa? You can go, don't worry about me. The companion, he says, oh Abu Abdullah, I am here because I'm afraid that an arrow might strike our tents and I want to take it so it doesn't strike you. And if I were to leave you, and if I were to abandon you, oh Abu Abdullah, then let the wild beasts of this desert eat me alive. I'm not leaving you, oh Abu Abdullah, don't worry. At this moment, it is said that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he enters into the tent of Zainab. Now hear this. That he enters into the tent of Zainab, and Zainab says, oh Abu Abdullah, are you sure about the loyalty of your companions? Are you sure that they are going to remain in your support tomorrow? And as Nafi' ibn Hilal was returning back to the tent, he overheard Zainab alayhi salam uttering these words to Imam al-Hussein. So at that moment he rushes to Habib ibn Madahir, who was the chief of the companions. And he says, "Oh Habib," he says, "I was conversing with Imam al-Hussein and I heard Zainab questioning our loyalty." At that moment, Habib ibn Madahir was sharpening his sword, ready, preparing himself for the next day's battle. He lifts his sword to the companions and he says, "Oh Ashab, the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib is questioning our loyalty. Let us show how courageous we are." At that moment, they all rush out of the tent. They hold their swords in front of the tent of Zainab and they say, "Oh daughter of Ali, know that every one of us will give our lives for your brother Abu Abdullah. Don't question us. This is our promise to you, O Zainab, and we wish to be amongst them on a night like this one." It is stated that at the end of that night, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he begins to build and dig up a ditch behind the tents of the companions and behind the tents of the family of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And he advises his companions to place wood into that ditch, telling them that in the morning after Fajr prayers, let us light this wood on fire. They say, "Oh Abu Abdullah, why should we light this ditch on fire?" He says, "But perhaps this fire will protect the women and children after all of us have been killed." But I say, "Oh Abu Abdullah, do you know what they did to your women? Do you know what they did to your women and your children on the night of the 11th of Muharram, oh Abu Abdullah?" Allahu Akbar. It is said, according to some of the reporters of the Maqtal, that when Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, he captured Hurmala ibn Kahil, he asks him, he says, "Oh Hurmala, tell me, what did you do on the day of Ashura? Why did you do what you did?" At this moment, Hurmala, he says, "Oh Mukhtar, that on the day of Ashura, I struck 4 arrows which hit their target." He says, "Tell me, O Hurmala, what were those 4 arrows which struck their target?" He says, "The first arrow that I struck that hit its target was hitting the right eye of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas after his arms had been severed. And at that moment a man came and took a dagger which struck his head. And at that moment Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas fell down from his horse. Normally when a man falls down from his horse, he has his hands to protect him. But Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas didn't have any hands. At this moment it is said, what is the second arrow that you struck that hit his target, O Harmala? He says the second arrow was an arrow that struck Abdullah ibn Hassan, one of the sons of Imam al-Hassan. He says that when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was in his final moments, it is said that Abdullah ibn Hassan, this young man, young boy, he rushes out of the tent and he looks toward all of the army of Umar ibn Sa'd. He's just a young boy and he looks at them and he says, "Are you really going to kill my uncle?" At that moment, Umar ibn Sa'd says, "Take an arrow and strike this boy." So at that moment, I struck the shoulder of Abdullah ibn Hassan. He fell down onto the lap of Abu Abdullah, who was already lying down on the ground. And he says, "Oh, my uncle Abu Abdullah, what did they do to you?" And Hussein responds to this young man, and he says, "Oh, my young son, don't worry, you're going to visit your father very soon." At this moment, Mukhtar, he says, "Oh Harmala, what was the third arrow that you struck on the day of Ashura which hit its target?" He says, "This one was hard, this one was painful, and I still think about it till today." At this moment, Mukhtar, he says, "Oh Harmala, tell me what arrow was that?" He says, "That was the arrow that struck the 6-month-old infant, the son of Hussein." He says, "Oh Harmala, what happened?" He says that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam exits from his tent and he calls out, "Hal min nasirin yansuruni?" Is there anyone to help me? At that moment, Zainab exits from the tent holding the child and says, "Oh my brother Abu Abdullah, I'm worried that this child doesn't have any water and perhaps it will die out of thirst. Perhaps you can take a sip of water so we can offer contentment to his mother Rabab. It is said that at this moment, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he enters into the tent of Zainab and he calls out, Nawilini waladi al-Rabi, give me my suckling infant, and perhaps they will give him some water. It is said that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he exits from the tent and he holds his baby with his cloak, perhaps covering him from the heat of the sun of that day. And he enters into the middle of the battlefield and he says that if you have an issue with me, then you can kill me. You've already killed my companions, you've already killed my family members. وَلَكِنْ مَا ضَنْبٌ هَذَا الرَّضِيعِ, but what is the sin of this 6-month-old infant? At that moment, the army of Umar bin Saad, some said, give him a sip of water. Others said, no, kill him and kill his father. At this moment, Umar bin Saad says to Harmala, he says, اقطع نزاع القوم, that our community, our army, they're split, so end it and kill him. At this moment, Harmala says, who should I strike? Should I strike the son or should I strike the father? He says, strike the son so it strikes the father as well. He said, at that moment I took my arrow. Oh Shia, I'm sorry to say this, but he puts it into the bowl. And at that moment he sees the whiteness on the neck of this child. Allahu Akbar! This neck this arrow severs the neck of the 6-month-old infant. The arrow severs the neck of the 6-month-old infant. He looks at his father, Abu Abdullah, perhaps as to say, what just happened to me? At this moment, Imam al-Hussein is holding this child in shock, wondering what happens. He looks up at the sky and says, Inna lillahi wa inna إليه راجعون هونا ما نزل بي أنه بعين الله. It offers me contentment to know that this was in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One report says that Imam al-Hussein had all of this blood in his hand from his infant son, so he didn't know what to do, so he threw it up into the sky, and not one drop of that blood returned back, as if to say, oh Abu Abdullah, there's a nurse in paradise ready to care for your son. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he doesn't know what to do, so he goes toward the tents of Zainab alayhi salam. He digs a small grave and places the child within it. Then he enters into the tent, and at this moment Zainab says, did you bring some water for the child? At this moment Imam al-Hussein shows her his hands. Only a moment later Sakina comes and says, Ya Aba, Anni Atshana, I'm thirsty, oh my father. Does my brother have any water to drink? At this moment, Imam al-Hussein, he looks towards Zainab and says, I don't have the strength to tell the mother. So you know what Zainab does? She goes to Rabab and she says, oh Rabab, you know Layla? She gave Ali al-Akbar. You know Ramla? She gave Qasim. At this moment, Rabab said, what did they do to my son? But that's not it, my friends. At this moment, Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, he says to Harmala ibn Kahil, he says the first arrow was the one that struck Habil Fadl al-Abbas. The second one was the one that struck Abdullah. The third one was the one that struck the infant. What was the fourth arrow that hit its target on the day of Ashura? It's the night of Ashura, my friends. You know what he says? He says the fourth arrow that I struck on the day of Ashura was when Imam al-Hussein was all alone. He was tired. He was exhausted. He was thirsty. We had surrounded him by arrows and we had surrounded him by spears. He was taking a break when all of a sudden a man took a boulder and he struck the forehead of Imam al-Hussein. The Imam lifted up his shirt to wipe off his blood. Harmala says, I took a 3-pronged arrow that was utilized to kill camels and I struck it through the chest of Hussein. Imam al-Hussein tried to remove it from the front of his chest, but he couldn't do so. Then he tried to remove it from the back, and at that moment he falls down from his horse. Hussein! Ya Hussein! Ya Hussein! Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Please stand. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.